Fletcher Hinton owned more land than most men in the territory could cross in a lifetime. His ranch stretched from the winding creek at the valley floor all the way to the rocky shoulders of the mountains, where snow lingered even in late spring. Thousands of cattle bore his brand. Freight agents watched his decisions closely, because when Fletcher sold, prices shifted. When he held back, markets waited. In the American West, that was power. Among ranchers, bankers, and territorial officials, Fletcher Hinton was spoken of with a certain respect. Sometimes admiration, sometimes unease. He was disciplined, exacting, a man who wasted neither words nor effort. He rose before dawn, worked until his body ached, and expected the same from anyone who took his pay. He had built his empire deliberately, fence post by fence post, ledger line by ledger line. Nothing about his success was accidental. From the outside, his life looked complete. But success has a way of lying. Every evening, when the last rider returned from the range and the yard gates were closed, Fletcher rode back to a house far too large for one man. 3 stories of timber and stone, 15 rooms, fireplaces that could warm entire families, hallways that carried sound like empty canyons. When he stepped inside, there was no laughter to greet him, no voice calling his name. Only the echo of his boots on polished floors and the faint ticking of clocks he had installed simply to break the silence. Dinner was always served on time. 1 plate, 1 chair at the long table. Fletcher ate without hurry, without thought, staring past the oil lamp as if the meal were only another task to be completed. He had grown used to the quiet, so used to it that he told himself it was normal. The price of ambition, the cost of command. Men like him did not complain about loneliness. They endured it. The house ran efficiently, like everything else in Fletcher's life. Floors scrubbed, linens clean, fires laid before nightfall. And at the center of that quiet order moved Carly. She was Apache. That fact alone made her invisible to most who passed through the ranch. To neighbors, she was simply the Indian girl who worked in Hinton's house. To visitors, she was a presence barely noticed, eyes lowered, hands busy. But Carly did not lower her eyes for Fletcher Hinton. She moved through the house with calm purpose, her work precise and unhurried. She spoke only when necessary. She did not smile to please nor shrink to soften herself. There was no fear in her posture, no false warmth in her voice. When Fletcher entered a room, she did not rush to impress him, nor did she avert herself like someone waiting to be dismissed. She simply acknowledged him and continued. That, more than anything, unsettled him. Fletcher began to notice small things. The way Carly arranged the table without excess, the way she listened more than she spoke, the way she paused sometimes at the window, watching the land as if she understood it in a way others did not. She worked with the quiet confidence of someone who had learned long ago to rely on herself. When she looked at Fletcher, there was no calculation in her eyes, no hunger, no resentment. She did not see a powerful white rancher, she saw a man. That was rare. Most people looked at Fletcher Hinton and saw opportunity or threat. Carly saw neither. She treated him with a level, steady respect that did not bend under his wealth or his authority. It was not defiance. It was something simpler, something more dangerous. Equality. Fletcher told himself it meant nothing. She was an employee, a hired hand in a different form, an Apache woman doing what she had to do to survive in a world that offered her few choices. He had no business thinking about her beyond the smooth running of his household. And yet he found himself listening for her footsteps in the mornings, noticing the exact moment she left the room, feeling the house grow heavier once she was gone. He did not understand why the silence felt sharper when Carly was not nearby. Late one evening, Fletcher stood alone in the parlor, glass of whiskey untouched in his hand. Firelight flickered against the walls, throwing shadows that stretched and collapsed like memories. The house breathed around him, vast and hollow. He had land, he had power, he had everything a man was supposed to want in the West. But standing there with no one to speak to and nothing waiting for him beyond another dawn of work, Fletcher Hinton felt a truth settle deep in his chest, quiet, undeniable, and dangerous. He had built an empire, but he had never built a home. Carly had learned early that in the American West, being Apache meant you were seen before you were heard, and judged long before anyone bothered to understand. To some, her people were spoken of with contempt. to others with a soft, dangerous pity that stripped them of strength just as surely. Either way, the result was the same. Fewer choices, fewer protections, fewer chances to belong. Under Fletcher Hinton's roof, Carly was called a maid. In the wider world, she was something far more complicated. She carried no visible scars, but history lived in her posture. In the way she never turned her back fully on a room. In the way she slept lightly, even in a house guarded by locks and distance. In the way she measured people before trusting them, if she trusted them at all. Carly did not speak of her past. She did not offer stories, explanations, or grievances. But Fletcher began to understand that silence, too, could be a language. Every careful step, every deliberate pause, carried memory, loss, survival. Within the ranch house, she kept her boundaries clear. She did her work thoroughly, never more than required, never less. She did not linger where she wasn't needed. She did not invite familiarity, nor did she shrink from it. If someone spoke to her respectfully, she responded in kind. If they spoke down to her, she gave them nothing at all. Fletcher noticed this long before he understood it. He saw it when guests visited. Bankers, cattle buyers, men who spoke loudly and expected the world to rearrange itself around them. Carly served them with calm efficiency, eyes steady, movements controlled. She did not flinch when they looked past her. She did not bristle when they dismissed her. She simply existed, unmovable, like the land itself. More than once, Fletcher caught a visitor glancing at Carly, then back at him, surprised that an Apache woman worked openly in his household. Fletcher never explained. He did not need to. Carly was there because she chose to be, and because he allowed her to work without pretending she was anything other than what she was, an Apache woman with dignity intact. Over time, Fletcher began to realize something else, something unexpected. Carly understood the land, not in the way surveyors understood it, not as numbers on paper or acreage to be divided. She understood it through patterns and signs, through weather shifts, through the way soil darkened before rain, or how animals moved when seasons turned early. One morning, Fletcher mentioned a concern about the north pasture. The grass there had thinned faster than expected. He spoke about it absent-mindedly, more to himself than to anyone else. Carly paused where she stood, hands stilling on the tablecloth. "The ground's been holding water too long," she said quietly. "Roots drown before they starve." Fletcher looked up, surprised. He hadn't asked her opinion. She met his gaze without challenge, without apology. "You'll lose more weight from the herd if you keep them there another week," she added. "Move them east. The wind dries that soil quicker." That was all she said. Later that day, Fletcher rode out to inspect the pasture himself. What he saw unsettled him. Not because Carly was wrong, but because she was right. Precisely right. From then on, he listened more carefully. Carly never offered advice unless it mattered. She never tried to prove herself. But when she spoke, her words carried weight. She understood hardship not as theory, but as lived experience. The kind learned through watching seasons fail and people endure. And still, despite everything, she never treated Fletcher Hinton like a man to be feared or admired. She treated him like someone carrying a heavy load. When Fletcher was sharp with the ranch hands, Carly did not soften her tone to compensate. When he was silent, she did not fill the space with chatter. She adjusted, not to his authority, but to his mood, as one human being might adjust to another. There was no flattery in it, no calculation. That unsettled Fletcher more than open defiance ever could. He began to realize how rare it was to be seen without expectation, to be addressed without desire or judgment attached. Carly asked nothing of him. She did not look at him as an escape from her circumstances, nor as a savior. She looked at him as a man responsible for his choices, and no more than that. At night, Fletcher found himself thinking about her in ways that had nothing to do with want. He thought about how she moved through the house like someone who refused to be owned by it, how she belonged nowhere fully, yet stood firmly wherever she was. The house felt different when Carly was nearby, less hollow, less echoing, as if the walls themselves listened when she passed. Fletcher did not yet understand what that meant. He only knew that something in his carefully ordered life had shifted. Not loudly, not suddenly, but irreversibly. Under his roof lived an Apache woman who did not ask for mercy, did not bow to power, and did not offer herself to be defined by another man's world. And Fletcher Hinton was beginning to realize that she understood the cost of survival and the weight of silence better than anyone he had ever known. In the American West, a man like Fletcher Hinton was not expected to stand alone for long. Success invited scrutiny, wealth drew opinions, and power sooner or later demanded a legacy. The pressure did not come all at once. It arrived in pieces, half-joking remarks at cattle auctions, lingering looks at town meetings, comments disguised as concern. Other ranch owners spoke of wives the way they spoke of rail contracts and grazing rights. Necessary arrangements, proof of stability. "You've built an empire, Hinton," one banker told him over whiskey. "Time you built a family to go with it." Another rancher laughed and clapped him on the shoulder. "All that land and no one to leave it to. Seems like a waste." They meant it kindly, or at least they thought they did. Fletcher listened, nodded when required, and changed the subject. He had learned long ago that explaining himself only invited more questions. He told himself he did not care what they thought. He had never needed approval to run his ranch. He would not start needing it now. But the talk followed him. The territorial ball was approaching, an annual affair held in the largest hall the region could offer. It was spoken of as a celebration, but everyone knew its true purpose. Deals were made there, alliances formed, futures arranged. It was where young women were presented and older men evaluated prospects, not just for marriage, but for advantage. Fletcher had avoided the ball for years. He sent polite regrets, claimed pressing business, blamed weather or cattle or distance. No one challenged him. A man of his standing could afford to be eccentric. This year was different. Invitations arrived embossed and formal, heavy paper bearing the weight of expectation. Fletcher set his aside without opening it. He told himself he would ignore it like all the others. And yet the thought lingered. That evening, Fletcher returned home later than usual. The sun had dipped low, staining the sky in copper and gold. Inside the house, lamplight glowed softly, warming the long shadows that stretched across the floor. Carly was in the dining room, finishing preparations for supper. She moved with unhurried precision, sleeves rolled just enough to free her hands. The lamplight caught the bronze of her skin, the quiet focus in her eyes. She tasted the stew, adjusted the seasoning, and set the ladle aside. No excess, no waste. Everything done with intention. Fletcher paused in the doorway without realizing it. He watched her for a moment longer than necessary. There was something grounding about the scene. No audience, no expectations. Just a woman doing her work with care. Carly did not rush when she sensed him there. She did not straighten or step back as others did. She turned calmly, meeting his gaze. "Supper will be ready in a few minutes," she said. "Nothing more." Fletcher nodded, but he didn't leave. For the first time all day, the tightness in his chest eased. The house felt warmer, less hollow. Carly did not ask him how his day had been. She did not offer sympathy or admiration, and somehow, that made the quiet between them easier to bear. It struck him then, clear and sharp. Every woman he had ever been urged to court saw Fletcher Hinton as a position, as land, as a future secured by his name and his holdings. They would smile at the right moments, speak carefully, and never truly look at him. Carly looked at him, not as a prize, not as a threat, but as a man who came home tired, carrying the weight of decisions no one else had to make. The realization unsettled him. He sat at the table watching as Carly served the meal. When she set the bowl in front of him, their hands brushed briefly. She didn't flinch. Neither did he. But something in the air shifted, subtle and undeniable. Fletcher lifted his spoon, then set it down again. "There's a ball coming up," he said, surprising himself. Carly glanced at him. "So I've heard. They expect me to attend this year." "Yes." She said it plainly without opinion. Fletcher studied her face, searching for something. Curiosity, judgment, interest. There was none. Only attention. "They expect me to bring someone," he continued. Carly waited. The silence stretched. Fletcher felt the familiar pull of restraint, the instinct to stop before crossing a line. Men like him did not speak carelessly. Words had consequences. And yet in that quiet room, with lamplight pooling between them and the rest of the world held at bay, Fletcher felt something loosen. The words escaped him before he could reconsider. "Would you go with me?" The moment froze. Carly did not respond at once. She did not laugh. She did not recoil. She simply stood there, eyes fixed on him, as if measuring the weight of what he had just said. Fletcher realized too late how impossible the question was. An Apache woman, a white man's ball, a housemaid standing beside one of the most powerful ranchers in the territory. The scandal alone would be enough to ruin reputations. Hers. His. Carly set the serving spoon down carefully. "You don't say things like that without meaning them," she said at last. Fletcher swallowed. "I know." Her gaze sharpened. Not angry, but alert. "Then you should understand," she continued quietly, "that once spoken, a thing like that can't be taken back." He met her eyes. "I'm aware." The silence that followed was heavier than any answer. In that moment, Fletcher Hinton understood he had crossed a threshold he could not see behind him anymore. The invitation was out in the open now, dangerous, improper, and irreversible. And whatever Carly chose to say next would change everything. Carly did not answer him right away. She stood still, hands resting lightly against the edge of the table, eyes steady on Fletcher's face. Not startled, not offended, just alert, like someone who understood exactly how dangerous a moment could be if mishandled. Fletcher waited. In the West, silence was often mistaken for weakness. Carly had learned it could also be armor. "You understand what you're asking," she said at last. It wasn't a question. Fletcher nodded. "I do." She studied him for another long breath, as if weighing not only his words but the man behind them. The invitation he had spoken was not merely improper, it was reckless. A white rancher of his standing did not bring an Apache woman, his housemaid no less, into a hall built for alliances, appearances, and power. That was not scandal. That was defiance. "It wouldn't just be talk," Carly said quietly. "It would follow us, everywhere." "I know." "They would laugh at you. I can live with that. They would look at me like I don't belong." Carly's voice did not waver. She had lived that look her entire life. Fletcher met her gaze. "You belong where you choose to stand." That earned him a pause, a longer one. Carly exhaled slowly and stepped back, creating space between them. When she spoke again, her tone was precise, measured, deliberate, stripped of emotion. "If I consider this," she said, "there are conditions." Fletcher straightened. "Name them." She held up one finger. "First," Carly said, "you will not pretend I am anything other than what I am. I am Apache. I will not wear another name, another story, or another lie to make others comfortable." Fletcher did not hesitate. "Agreed." A second finger. "If anyone insults me," she continued, "if I am mocked, dismissed, or treated like something less than human, I leave, immediately, no explanations, no arguments." Fletcher's jaw tightened. "You won't stand alone in that." "I won't stand at all," Carly corrected. "I'll walk away." He nodded. "Fair." Then she raised a third finger. "When the night ends," she said, "everything goes back the way it was. I return to my work. You return to your life. No promises, no expectations." That one landed harder. Fletcher felt it settle in his chest like a weight. The ball, the attention, the dangerous proximity. It would all dissolve by morning. He would still be Fletcher Hinton, owner of land and cattle and power. She would still be Carly, Apache woman working under his roof. Nothing would change. He swallowed, then said, "Understood." Carly lowered her hand. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The house felt unusually quiet, as if even the walls were listening. "You should know," Carly said softer now, "that people like me don't get to make demands often. We're expected to accept whatever is offered, or leave with nothing." Fletcher's voice was low. "I didn't ask you because I wanted compliance." She searched his face again, looking for something. False pride, hunger, ownership. She found none. "You asked because you're tired of standing alone," she said. It wasn't an accusation, it was an observation. "Yes," Fletcher said simply. Carly considered that. Then she turned away, moving toward the window. Outside, the land stretched dark and endless beneath the coming night. The same land her people had once crossed freely. The same land now fenced, measured, owned. "You'll be risking more than gossip," she said, her back still to him. "Men like you don't fall far, but when they do, others enjoy watching." "I didn't build what I have by protecting my comfort," Fletcher replied, "and I won't start now." She turned back slowly. "You won't try to stop me if I choose to leave," she said. "I won't. You won't try to protect me by hiding me." "I won't. You won't expect gratitude." "I won't." Something unreadable flickered across Carly's face. Surprise, perhaps, or something close to respect. She nodded once. "Then I'll go." The words hung between them, heavier than either had expected. Fletcher released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Thank you." Don't thank me yet, Carly said. This isn't kindness, it's a test. A test of what? Of whether you mean what you say, she replied, and whether you'll still mean it when the room turns cold. She turned to leave, then stopped at the doorway. One more thing, she added. Yes, if I stand beside you, Carly said, I do it by choice. Not because you asked, and not because I owe you anything. Fletcher met her eyes steady and unflinching. That, he said, is the only way I'd want you there. Carly left the room, her footsteps fading down the hall. Fletcher remained where he was, the weight of his decision settling over him. For the first time in years, he felt something unfamiliar rise above caution and calculation. He had agreed to terms set by the lowest one in the room, and he knew, deep in his bones, that it was the most honest bargain he had ever made. The territorial ballroom had been built to impress. Crystal lamps glowed against high ceilings. Polished floors reflected silk dresses and tailored coats. The air carried the blended sense of perfume, wax, and ambition. This was where the West dressed itself up and pretended it had manners, where wealth gathered to admire itself. When Fletcher Hinton entered, conversation shifted instinctively. He was expected, not welcomed exactly, but acknowledged. A man of his stature always was. What no one expected was the woman on his arm. The room did not fall silent all at once. It stuttered. Words trailed off. Laughter caught mid-breath. Heads turned one after another as recognition spread like a slow-burning fuse. An Apache woman. Not hidden, not dressed as a curiosity, not trailing behind. Walking beside him. Eyes followed Carly as if they needed confirmation that what they were seeing was real. Her dress was simple, well-made, absent of excess. No attempt to imitate the women around her. Her hair was neatly arranged, her posture straight, her movements measured and calm. She did not look down. She did not rush. She stepped into that room as though she had every right to occupy the space she took. The looks came quickly, mockery sharpened with curiosity, pity mixed with open disdain. Carly felt them all. She had known such gazes her entire life. The difference tonight was not the judgment. It was that she was not alone. Fletcher felt the tension tighten along his spine. He could hear the murmurs beginning, low and eager. He knew what they were saying without needing to listen. He did not slow his step. He did not adjust his grip on Carly's arm. He kept walking. They passed groups of guests who pretended not to stare, and others who made no effort at all. A woman's lips curved in a thin smile that was not kind. A man laughed softly into his drink. Someone whispered a name that was not Carly's, followed by a slur they thought she could not hear. Carly heard everything. She did not react. A server passed with champagne, nearly colliding with a guest who had stopped too abruptly to stare. The man muttered something sharp. Carly reached out, steadying the tray before it tipped. "Careful," she said gently. The server flushed, nodded gratefully, and moved on. The small act did not go unnoticed. As the evening progressed, the room tried to decide what to do with her. Some ignored Carly completely, as if refusing acknowledgement might make her disappear. Others watched closely, waiting for a mistake, an unfamiliar fork, a misstep in conversation, a sign that she did not belong. They waited in vain. When a banker boasted too loudly about cattle prices, Carly corrected him calmly, citing figures Fletcher himself had discussed weeks earlier. When a woman's necklace clasp broke, Carly fixed it discreetly with a pin drawn from her sleeve, sparing her embarrassment. When a man spilled wine and went red with humiliation, Carly waved it off with a quiet remark that shifted laughter away from him instead of toward him. Each kindness unsettled the room further. This was not how an Apache woman was supposed to behave. She was meant to be defensive, or grateful, or small. Carly was none of those things. Fletcher watched it unfold with a feeling he could not quite name. Pride, perhaps, or recognition. He saw the way people began to look at Carly again, not with admiration, not yet, but with uncertainty. Their assumptions were failing them. Music swelled as couples gathered near the dance floor. Fletcher felt Carly's hand tighten briefly against his sleeve. He glanced down. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. "Yes," she said, "but this won't end unless you choose how it ends." He understood immediately. Across the room, eyes followed them, waiting. Fletcher stepped forward, turning toward Carly fully. He extended his hand. "May I?" he asked. The question was unnecessary. The meaning was not. Carly looked at his hand for a fraction of a second, then placed her own in it. Her palm was warm, steady. They moved together toward the center of the floor. Conversations ceased entirely now. No one pretended anymore. This was no longer curiosity, it was confrontation. The music began. Fletcher placed his hand at Carly's waist, proper and deliberate. She rested her hand on his shoulder. The distance between them was correct by every rule the room claimed to respect, and yet nothing about it felt safe to those watching. They danced, not dramatically, not to provoke, simply well. They moved with quiet coordination, turning smoothly as if they had practiced, though they had not. Fletcher felt Carly's breath steady against the rise and fall of the music. He felt her confidence grow with each step. He felt the room watching, measuring, recalculating. This was no spectacle. It was a statement. By choosing to dance with her, Fletcher made something unmistakably clear. He was not indulging a whim. He was not making a joke. He was standing beside Carly, publicly, deliberately, without apology, against expectation, against tradition, against prejudice. When the music ended, applause followed, not loud at first, then spreading unevenly through the room. Some clapped out of politeness, others because they did not know what else to do. A few because they understood at last that something had shifted. Carly stepped back, her expression composed. Fletcher released her hand only when she let go. The room did not look the same anymore. Prejudice had not vanished, but it had cracked. And in the space where certainty once stood, doubt had taken its place. For the first time that night, Carly allowed herself a small breath. The night was far from over, but the balance of power had changed. The ball ended, but its echo did not. By morning, Fletcher Hinton's name traveled faster than his cattle ever had. It moved through saloons, bank offices, church steps, and trading posts, carried on lowered voices and sharpened smiles. Some spoke of him with amusement, others with outrage, a few with something close to admiration, though they would never admit it aloud. He had crossed a line. As for Carly, her name was rarely spoken directly. More often she was referred to as the Apache woman, the girl from Hinton's house, that woman he brought. She became a subject, an idea, a rumor shaped to fit other people's discomfort. None of it surprised her. What did surprise her was how little any of it seemed to matter when she was alone with Fletcher. The days that followed were quieter than expected. No confrontation arrived at the ranch gates, no official letters, no sudden withdrawals of business. Instead, there was a waiting, heavy, watchful, like the air before a storm. Inside the house, the silence changed. It no longer felt empty. Carly went about her work as she always had, but Fletcher noticed the difference in the way their paths crossed. The brief pauses, the moments where words hovered, unspoken, between them. A look held half a second longer than necessary, a shared awareness that could not be ignored. They did not speak of the ball at first. They didn't need to. One evening, Fletcher found Carly in the kitchen after supper, wiping down the counter. The fire burned low, casting amber light across the room. Outside, the wind moved through the grass like a distant tide. "You could have left," he said quietly. Carly did not turn. "I could have, but you didn't." She set the cloth aside. "No." He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, not guarding himself, but grounding himself. "Do you regret it?" Carly considered the question carefully. "I regret many things," she said. "Standing beside you isn't one of them." That honesty unsettled him more than anger ever could. "I don't regret it either," Fletcher said. The words hung between them, unprotected. From that night on, it became harder to pretend that nothing had changed. They shared long stretches of quiet that felt intimate rather than awkward. When Fletcher returned from the range, exhausted and dust-covered, Carly met him with the same calm presence she always had. But now he felt seen in it. When she spoke, he listened fully, not as a rancher weighing usefulness, but as a man hearing another man, or woman, tell the truth. And that was the danger. Carly felt it too. She recognized the pull, subtle but persistent, the way Fletcher never demanded, never assumed, the way he gave space even when closeness would have been easier. She had known men who took and called it protection, men who offered shelter in exchange for silence or obedience. Fletcher was not one of them. That made him more frightening, not less. One afternoon, Carly stood at the back porch watching the horizon. Fletcher joined her without a word. They stood shoulder to shoulder, close enough to feel the heat of each other, distant enough to pretend it meant nothing. "I won't stay if this becomes something I owe you," Carly said suddenly. Fletcher turned his head. "I would never ask that." I know, she replied. That's why I'm saying it now. She looked at him then, really looked at him. I've spent my life surviving other people's choices. I won't trade that for comfort. Fletcher's jaw tightened. And I won't use what I have to keep you here. She searched his face as if testing the truth of it. Even if I leave? Especially then. The admission cost him. He felt it in his chest, sharp and steady. Power had always been his tool, his shield, his leverage. Letting go of it, even in words, felt like stepping onto unfamiliar ground. Carly nodded slowly. That's what scares me. What? He asked. That I believe you. The quiet stretched again, thick with meaning. They were past the point of denial now. Whatever lay between them had grown roots. It was no longer a passing connection, no longer curiosity or circumstance. It had weight, shape, consequence. Fletcher felt the truth settle with a clarity that left no room for escape. The danger was not society's judgment, not scandal, not the whispers that followed him through town. The danger was this: standing beside an Apache woman who asked nothing of him, and realizing how deeply he wanted her to stay. Carly felt it too, like a tightening thread beneath her ribs. The fear was not that she would lose her independence. It was that she might choose him freely. And once chosen, neither of them would be able to pretend it meant nothing ever again. What they felt could no longer hide. And neither of them knew yet whether that truth would set them free or cost them everything. Freedom did not arrive with ceremony. It came quietly, folded into a letter Carly did not expect and had no reason to trust at first. The paper was worn, the ink slightly faded, the words written with careful restraint. It spoke of an opportunity beyond Fletcher Hinton's land. Work promised elsewhere. Fair pay, no obligations, no ties. A chance to stand on her own ground, answer to no one, and leave behind the complicated gravity of the ranch. For an Apache woman, such chances were rare enough to feel unreal. Carly read the letter twice, then folded it and set it aside. She went about her day as usual, but something in her rhythm shifted. Fletcher noticed. He always did. That evening, she found him outside near the corral, watching the horses settle for the night. The sky stretched wide and colorless, the last light thinning into dusk. It was the kind of hour that invited honesty, whether one wanted it or not. I've been offered a way out, Carly said, her voice steady. Fletcher did not turn immediately. He nodded once, as if he had been expecting the words. Where? He asked. South, she replied. Far enough. He faced her then. The wind lifted dust between them, carrying the smell of leather and earth. Is it real? Yes. Safe? As safe as anything ever is. Silence followed, not heavy, not strained, just present. You should take it, Fletcher said at last. Carly studied him closely. There was no hesitation in his voice, no bargaining, no tightening of his posture, as if bracing to pull her back. That was quick, she said. It shouldn't be, he replied. You didn't come here to belong to me. She searched his face for something he wasn't saying. You could make it easier for me to stay. I won't, Fletcher said quietly. The words surprised them both. If you stay because I offer protection, he continued, or comfort, or the weight of what I own, then whatever we are stops being honest. And I won't build anything on that. Carly felt the truth of it land, sharp and undeniable. I won't keep you here, he added. Not with money, not with position, not with feeling. That hurt more than she expected. She nodded once. Then I'll go. The days that followed were careful, measured. Carly prepared quietly, sorting what little she owned. Fletcher did not interfere. He did not offer advice or reassurance. He respected her leaving the same way he had respected her staying, by not claiming it. On her last morning, the ranch woke early. The land lay still beneath pale light, the air crisp with change. Carly stepped onto the porch with her bag in hand. Fletcher stood near the fence, hat low, hands resting easy at his sides. They faced each other without ceremony. I don't regret coming here, Carly said. Neither do I. If I stay gone, she added, know that it wasn't because of fear. I know. She hesitated, then spoke the question she had carried silently for days. If I came back, on my own terms, would you still see me the same way? Fletcher's answer was immediate. I would see you because you chose to return. That was all. Carly turned toward the road. With each step away from the house, the land seemed to widen. The fence lines fell behind her. The ranch, once a place of shelter, tension, and truth, shrunk into the distance. Freedom felt lighter than she had imagined, and heavier. She walked for miles beneath open sky, her thoughts moving faster than her feet. She had asked for independence all her life. She had survived by guarding it fiercely. Now she had it, clean, uncompromised, unquestioned. And yet something ached. It wasn't the ranch, or the house, or the work she left behind. It was the man who had not tried to keep her. Carly realized the question she could no longer avoid. Was freedom still freedom if it meant walking away from someone who saw her fully and let her go anyway? By the time the sun dipped low again, the answer had not come. But the question stayed with her, steady and unrelenting, as she continued down the road. Free, alone, and no longer certain that those two things meant the same thing. Carly came back without announcement. There was no letter sent ahead, no warning carried by rumor. One morning, as the sun lifted slowly over the eastern ridge, Fletcher Hinton saw a lone figure walking up the long dirt road toward the ranch. The dust clung lightly to her boots, her pace unhurried, her posture steady. He recognized her before his mind caught up with the sight. She had left carrying uncertainty. She returned carrying something else. Choice. Fletcher did not move to meet her. He waited, hands resting loosely at his sides the way he did when he did not intend to claim anything that was not freely offered. When Carly reached the gate, she stopped on her own. "I didn't come back for work," she said before he could speak. "I wouldn't expect you to," Fletcher replied. The wind moved between them, carrying the sound of the land they both knew so well. Carly looked around, not with longing, not with resentment, but with clear-eyed familiarity. This place no longer defined her. It was simply where she stood. "I went far enough to know what leaving means," she said, "and what it doesn't." Fletcher nodded once. And I learned that independence isn't the same as isolation." She met his gaze directly. There was no hesitation now, no guarded edge. "I won't belong to you," Carly continued. "I won't live under your name or your protection. I wouldn't ask you to, but I will stand beside you," she said, "if what we build is shared." The words settled between them, solid and undeniable. "Tell me what that means," Fletcher said. "It means decisions together," Carly replied. "About the land, the people, the future. I won't be a presence you tolerate. I'll be a voice you listen to." Fletcher considered her carefully. Not as a rancher weighing risk, but as a man recognizing truth. "I won't always agree with you," he said. "I don't expect you to. And there will be times this costs us both." "I know." The corners of his mouth lifted. Not in amusement, but in respect. "Then you're not asking for partnership," he said. "You're offering it." "Yes." They stood in the open air, the space between them no longer charged with uncertainty, but with clarity. Fletcher felt something in his chest ease. Not because he had gained something, but because nothing was being taken from either of them. "You won't answer to me," he said. "No. And you won't stay because it's easier." "No." Fletcher exhaled slowly. "Then we'll begin again." Carly nodded. From that day on, the ranch shifted in ways no one could have predicted. Carly did not step back into the house as a servant. She worked alongside Fletcher in the open, learning accounts, discussing grazing patterns, speaking with ranch hands. Some looked twice, some looked away, others listened. When Carly spoke, she did so without apology. She brought a different understanding to the land, one rooted not in ownership but in balance. She questioned practices that exhausted the soil. She suggested changes that slowed profit in the short term and strengthened the ranch in the long one. Fletcher listened, not because he owed her, and not because he loved her, though that truth was growing clearer each day, but because she was right, because her perspective filled the spaces his had always missed. At night, when the work was done, they spoke openly, not in promises but in plans, not in rescue or gratitude but in trust. Their closeness was deliberate, chosen daily, shaped by mutual restraint as much as desire. Fletcher understood now what he had not before. This was not redemption. He had not saved Carly, and she had not softened him. They were building something harder than romance and stronger than comfort. They were building equality. And for the first time in his life, Fletcher Hinton knew that what stood beside him was not something he had earned, purchased, or protected. It was something that had chosen him in return. The ranch remained the same on the surface. Fences, fields, cattle, sky. But beneath it, everything had changed. Not because Carly had returned, but because she had returned free and stayed anyway. They did not marry in town. There was no church filled with witnesses who had doubted them, no music arranged to impress, no speeches meant to explain or justify what others could not understand. Fletcher and Carly stood instead beneath open sky, where the land stretched wide and unclaimed by walls or judgment. A small gathering watched, only those who mattered, a few ranch hands who had learned to listen before speaking, a woman from a neighboring homestead who had once been helped quietly by Carly, an older Apache man who said nothing, only nodded once, solemn and approving. That was enough. Carly wore what she chose, not a costume shaped to please white society, and not a symbol meant to soothe anyone's conscience. She wore colors that carried memory. Her hair was arranged with care, her posture steady, her gaze unflinching. She did not step forward as someone being claimed. She stepped forward as someone choosing. Fletcher stood beside her without ownership in his stance. He spoke his vows plainly, without grandeur. He promised partnership, not protection. Listening, not command. A future built together, not handed down. When Carly spoke, her voice carried easily in the open air. "I do not leave who I am to stand with you," she said. "I bring it with me." Fletcher answered without hesitation. "Then stand." That was their marriage. Afterward, life did not soften into ease, it deepened. Carly did not retreat into the house, nor did Fletcher continue as he always had. Decisions were shared, sometimes smoothly, sometimes with friction. Carly challenged practices that had long been accepted. Fletcher learned when to defend and when to yield. Neither surrendered themselves, both adjusted. The ranch noticed. Workers saw it first. Orders came less sharp, conversations more direct. Carly walked the land with Fletcher, spoke openly with hands who had once kept their distance. She listened to grievances without promise and followed through where it mattered. Some left, others stayed, new ones arrived. The ranch began to change, not in ownership, but in tone. When children came, they arrived quietly without announcement or ceremony. Their skin carried the sun in different ways. Their eyes reflected both parents. They learned early to walk the fields, to listen to the wind, to know that home was not a single story, but many held together. They learned two ways of seeing the land. One measured, one remembered. They were taught that neither erased the other. Visitors still came, some curious, some cautious, some openly hostile. But the ranch did not bend for them. They saw children who ran freely across the fields, who spoke without fear, who were not taught to shrink. They saw Carly standing at the head of the table when needed, Fletcher beside her, not in front. They saw a family that had not been born into place but had chosen it, daily, deliberately. Over time, the ranch became something different in the territory. A place where people were judged by their work, not their blood. Where disputes were settled by listening before force. Where the line between Apache and white blurred, then faded, replaced by something simpler. Respect. Fletcher sometimes watched this quietly from a distance. He remembered the man he had been, certain that power meant control, that wealth was enough to fill any absence. He knew better now. Carly had not taught him by correcting him. She had taught him by standing. At night, when the house filled with voices and movement, Fletcher felt the absence that had once followed him recede completely. The silence he had feared was gone, replaced by something earned. Family. Not the kind written into ledgers or arranged by society, not the kind built on obligation or name, but the kind formed when two people chose one another without erasing themselves, and kept choosing long after the world stopped watching. The ranch still stretched to the mountains. The cattle still bore Fletcher's brand, but the true measure of what they had built could not be counted in land or numbers. It lived in shared decisions, in children who belonged without question, in a woman who remained Apache beneath a white man's roof, in a man who learned that love did not ask her to become anything else. This family had not been given. It had been chosen. And because of that, it endured. Years passed the way they always do in the West, quietly, then all at once. Fletcher Hinton grew older without ever noticing the moment it began. The land still answered to his name. The cattle still carried his brand. The ranch remained one of the strongest in the territory. On paper, very little had changed, but everything that mattered had. On a late afternoon softened by age and memory, Fletcher stood on the porch of the same house he had once believed too large to fill. The mountains in the distance were dusted with early snow. Wind moved through the grass in slow, familiar waves. Somewhere behind him, laughter spilled out of open windows, uncontained, unhurried. He smiled before he realized he was doing it. There had been a time when Fletcher believed legacy was something you secured. Acres counted, contracts signed, names carved into records that would outlast you. He had chased that certainty with discipline and resolve, convinced that if he built enough, something permanent would remain. He had been wrong. Inside the house, life unfolded in small, ordinary ways. A pot simmered on the stove. Boots lay abandoned near the door. Children's voices rose and fell as they argued over nothing important at all. Carly moved through the space with the same steady presence she had always carried. Apache, unyielding, wholly herself. She caught his eye and raised a brow, a silent question. "Just listening," Fletcher said. She nodded, understanding. She always did. The children, no longer small, no longer uncertain, passed him without thought. One brushed his arm as she went, another called his name in passing, the word father spoken without hesitation or explanation. It landed where no title or praise ever had. There were men who still measured Fletcher by his holdings, by the weight of his influence, by the reach of his fences. He did not correct them. He no longer needed to. What he had built could not be listed or transferred. It lived in the way the ranch had become a place of return instead of control, in the way people spoke honestly here, in the way difference no longer meant distance. The old lines, Apache and white, owner and laborer, power and silence, had not vanished entirely, but they no longer defined the shape of daily life. Fletcher knew how rare that was. He thought of the moment Carly had walked away and the choice she had made to return. Not because she had to, not because he had asked, but because she wanted to build something that could stand without ownership. That choice had changed him more than any success ever had. Carly joined him on the porch, her shoulder resting lightly against his. There was no need for words. They had learned the value of quiet long ago. This time, not as emptiness, but as presence. "You ever think about what comes after?" she asked. "Sometimes," Fletcher replied. "Less than I used to." She smiled faintly. "Good." The sun dipped lower, staining the horizon in golden rust. Fletcher watched the land one last time, not as a possession, but as a witness to the life that had grown upon it. He had been wealthy before, powerful, respected, but standing there surrounded by voices and warmth and the woman who had chosen him when she could have left, Fletcher understood the truth with a clarity that left no room for regret. He had not found a legacy in land or cattle or reputation. He had found it in a home, in love that was not demanded, in family that was not inherited but chosen. The house behind him filled with sound, arguments, laughter, the ordinary music of belonging. Fletcher turned toward it, no longer standing apart. And as the story settles into silence, the question remains, not just for him, but for anyone who listens. If everything you've built disappeared tomorrow, what would still call you home?